Oh, please, your dad in the Special Forces? More like your dad's a full-time member of the park bench squad. A quiet classroom. One brave sentence from a teen about her dad. The teacher laughs. Then a visitor walks in, and the air changes. A small moment sets off a chain you won't see coming. Stay to the end. If this story pulls you in, subscribe to my YouTube channel and tap the bell so you never miss a new upload. Like the video and share it with a friend who loves suspense. Where are you watching from? Comment your city name below. The day it all shifted started quiet, like a held breath. The radiators clicked on and off under the windows, and the air smelled like wet wool and old tape. I sat by the glass and watched a pale sky settle over the parking lot. The kind of light that makes colors give up. A strip of police tape from the weekend's game still flapped on the fence, soggy and stubborn. In the hallway, someone had dropped a box of pencils, and they rolled until they hit the baseboard and stayed there like a line of little bones. You get used to the small sounds in a school, the hum and the scrape, the way doors pull their hinges and sigh, the pause before the bell. It all has a rhythm that lets you feel safe because you know what comes next. Our English teacher, Ms. Harrow, came in with her papers hugged to her ribs. She always moved like the edges of the room were just right for her, and she didn't want to touch them. She wore her hair pulled so tight it made your scalp ache to look at it. When she smiled, it was precise, a shape she had practiced. It never reached her eyes. Her voice could be kind if she chose. Most days, she liked it to be clean more than kind. "We're doing read-alouds," she said, putting a stack of essays on her desk and tapping them even. You were supposed to write about a person you would bring in to speak to the class. Someone you know, not a celebrity, not a character, not a famous athlete you saw on screen. Someone you can call. Some kids groaned. You could see them already trying to remember what they wrote at midnight. I had done mine early. I had crossed out whole lines because they felt like I was showing off. I had read it to the wall and back again. I told myself to use small words and not look at anyone while I said them. She went down the list with a pencil. When she said my name, my chest got tight. I stood up, bent my paper so it wouldn't shake, and started. I would invite my father. He doesn't like phones. He doesn't like cameras. He doesn't like to be late. He grew up in a small house with a broken back step and a mother who sang to the radio while she made eggs. He taught me to sit still with a hard thing until it gets less hard. He taught me to take apart a clock and find the spring by touch. He works in U.S. Special Forces. He's gone a lot. If he could come here, he would talk about how to be calm when the loud part of the world wants to win. I didn't look up until I read the last word. It was quiet. Not the good kind of quiet, not curiosity, but the blank where people make space for what they would decide to do with you. Somebody coughed into their sleeve. I kept my hands down. I could feel the pulse in my fingers. Then she laughed. It wasn't mean on purpose. It was light, like the sound of a glass when your nail hits it. It made my skin know things before my head did. "Oh, Maya," she said, drawing out my name as if it had an extra syllable. "We're not doing fiction." "It's not fiction," I said, and my voice sounded like it had to come a long way to get out of my mouth. She lifted her eyebrows the way people do when they want to be gentle while they press. "Special Forces parents do not talk about it," she said, "and they do not make school visits. Remember the prompt. Someone you know." "He is my father," I said. I keep my voice even because once I let it climb, it doesn't come back down for a while. A boy in the back let air out through his nose. A girl looked sideways at her friend and smiled with her lips pressed together. I waited for the part where the adult in the room protects the kid. The adult did not. "Sit down," she said. "Let's keep our feet on the floor." He sat. Cold started in my elbows and went out to my thumbs. I fixed my eyes on the edge of the window frame and counted a slow 5. She called on someone else, and he read about his aunt who fought fires and the way she kept her suit in the back of a closet because she didn't like to look at it. No one laughed at him. Maybe my face did something because Lena, who sat a row over, reached her shoe out and touched my sneaker and left it there, a small anchor. When the bell rang, the scrape and slam was louder than usual. A shoulder knocked mine on the way out, on purpose but not enough for a teacher to notice. I stayed until the room had emptied. In the hallway, the light was yellow and the floor smelled like mop soap. I leaned my forehead against the cold metal of my locker door and told my breath what speed to be. "Hey," Lena said. She had that way of speaking like she didn't want her words to make more mess than they had to. You okay? She laughed, I said. She shouldn't have, Lena said. You didn't deserve that. I know, I said, but it didn't touch anything yet. Career day was that afternoon. It always made the school feel like a waiting room. Parents in coats held paper cups and looked at the walls like they wanted to be useful. Someone had taped a banner at the back of the auditorium with crooked letters. On stage, the principal stood with her square smile and her necklace that clicked when she moved. The light washed everything flat. One by one, people talked about what they do with their time. A woman with dirt under her nails explained how you read the weather in a row of seedlings. A man in a blue polo with the water company logo taught us how not to touch a wire if you see one on the ground. A nurse told us about a scar she had from a restless patient and how she wears it like a receipt. After the big talk, we went back to homerooms, and the parents who were visiting rotated. The rain had started to lean in, the windows a moving sheet of gray. Desks were in a big square. Ms. Harrow wrote questions on the board in straight lines. Someone's father gripped a black umbrella and left a wet circle on the floor where it leaned. The first parent in our room was a florist. She smelled like cold water and green stems. She showed us how to cut at an angle. Her hands were steady. You could tell she liked to make quiet things exist. She took questions with a soft smile and left a little spray of leftover leaves on the table without meaning to. The room felt better after her. Then Jonah came in with a man about my mother's age with gray at his temples and a denim jacket. If you saw him in a grocery store, you'd never look twice. Not tall, not short. Not young, not old. He had a scar I couldn't name because it had healed into his face, so well you wouldn't see it unless you knew to look. He set his hand on the back of a chair and didn't sit. He scanned the room the way you count without moving your lips. This is my dad, Jonas said, and tried to roll his eyes, but his mouth couldn't help a smile. Nice to meet you, the man said. His voice held the sound a tire makes on wet road. It didn't need to be loud to carry. What do you do? Someone asked. The red-haired girl who always wore a stack of friendship bracelets had her chin in her hand like she was trying to look casual. Shipping, he said. I move things. I make sure the right things end up at the right place. He didn't pull props out of a bag. He didn't have a slideshow. He talked about straps and weight and checking the corners. He told us about waking up at 3 to beat a storm and the way the fog eats the edges of the road. He made it sound like you could give meaning to a day by doing each small part right. Halfway through, he glanced at our teacher. It was a light look, like touching a glass to see if it's hot. She met his eyes and then looked down at the paper in front of her, as if he'd put a hand on the desk and everything was shaking under it. Thanks for having me, he said, and his tone was polite but precise. You could feel the ends of his words land. He took a coin out of his pocket and set it on her desk. It clicked against the wood, not loud, but the kind of sound that draws your head whether you want it to or not. He didn't show it to us. He didn't say what it was. He didn't need to. She saw it and went wide around her mouth. Her hand opened a little without permission. Her jaw tightened. If you weren't watching, you'd miss it. I was watching. Some of us carry boxes, he said to the class, and some of us carry things you can't stack. I do a bit of both. He took questions like any dad. A kid asked if he drove a truck. He said sometimes. A girl asked if he ever got lost. He said all the time, and then he laughed, small, like he meant the other kind of lost too. He said, my name is Mark. If you need to get out from under something heavy, call me. That got a laugh, because people think they know what that means. He watched us like he had seen a lot of rooms full of teenagers, and all of them were the same and different. He finished. He nodded to the principal, who had slipped in and stood by the door, watching with her arms crossed in a way that meant she wanted to be ready to catch a falling thing without anyone seeing. Then he put his fingertips back on that coin and moved it a hair, as if to remind the air of it. Eileen, he said, soft, like it was a name he hadn't spoken in years, and had to test it. The word didn't make sense to me at first. It made sense to her. She flinched, a shift in shoulders you wouldn't know unless you had watched someone try not to move their face while pain passed through. The principal straightened. You could feel everyone trying to pretend they were not seeing a thing they were staring at. Excuse me? Ms. Harrow said, and her voice had lost a notch of its shape. Mark didn't repeat himself. He let the silence do its work. He looked around and found me without making it a show. Maya, he said like he had practiced the name so it would come out without breaking. Say your father's name. A part of me wanted to run. Another part felt like the floor had turned to ice and my shoes had spikes. My lips were dry. I said, Daniel Ward. He nodded, once like a man checking a knot. He turned back to the desk. The coin caught a slice of the gray light and flashed, dull and sure. You knew him, he said to the teacher. You know where he worked. You know what it cost. The principal stepped forward a half step, smile set, and eyes careful. Is everything all right? She asked, and the question meant more than what it said. Fine, our teacher answered, but her voice sounded like when you touch a glass and know it will crack soon even if it hasn't yet. She looked at the coin again, as if a story lay inside it, and she had to decide whether to read it out loud or swallow it. Mark lifted the coin and turned it with his thumb so we could see a little of it, not enough for a picture, just enough to know it had weight and a crest worn flat by a thumb. He closed his hand on it again. If a kid tells you something about her life and she isn't performing, he said to no one and everyone, maybe you believe her, even if believing her makes you step into a room you've been avoiding. He did not raise his voice. The rain made its steady sheet of sound on the windows. The clock above the door clicked loud. We were all quiet in that old school way. Not because we were told to be, but because something you don't get every day was happening and we knew better than to break it. The principal cleared her throat. Mark, she said, if you have a moment, I'd like to speak with you in my office. And you too, Miss Harrow. Mark nodded. He looked at me, and his eyes were not hard. They were tired and kind at once. He put the coin in his pocket. He touched his jacket like he needed to make sure it was still there. We'll be right back, the teacher said to us. She tried for brisk and landed on brittle. Her hand was flat on the desk, and her knuckles had gone pale. They left. The door clicked. A buzz went through the room like the one the lights give off when the building shifts to backup. Everyone tried to talk without moving their lips. Jonah looked at me like he'd showed a magician to class, and the trick cut his finger. He whispered, I didn't know the coin thing. I didn't know any of it. It's okay, I said, and I meant the part that was about him. A minute later, the principal stood in the doorway and said my name. The hall felt too long. You could hear distant lockers slamming like shots muffled in a winter coat. Her office wasn't big. It smelled like lemon cleaner and paper. A picture of a dog sat by the phone. Mark stood by the window, looking out at the parking lot and the glare of wet. Our teacher sat in a chair, hands pressed to her knees to keep them from shaking. Her spine was a straight line you could lay a ruler on. Close the door and sit down, the principal said. Mark turned. The softer part of his face had come forward. You could see it now, in his eyes, something like debt paid out one small coin at a time. He saved my life, he said. Twice. Your dad. Once in a way I could put in a report. Once in a way I couldn't. He asked me if I ever crossed your path to carry something for him. I held it too long. They said don't. They say don't a lot. It gets in your bones until you forget how to hear yes. How do you know me? I asked. My voice felt like it would blow away if I pushed it too hard. He half smiled, like he knew what it's like to have words feel heavy in your mouth. Small town, he said. A flyer came home, and a name on a volunteer list, and one phone call that led to another. He glanced at the principal, and she gave a short nod. Be plain, it seemed to say. Be careful after. He looked at our teacher. He didn't look at her like you look at a person you want to hurt. He looked at her like you look at a door you used to walk through every day, and you're not sure if the key will still work. You were there, he said. You were on a line. You heard a voice say wait and hold, and you knew what not waiting costs. You knew what holding costs. All these years, and you teach words now, and you forgot what a certain kind of word does to a person in a chair. She swallowed. A small sound escaped her, not a cry, but the beginning of one. I was a contract linguist, she said, her tone quiet, plain, like she was giving us a weather report. I sat in a hot room with no clocks. I heard voices that did not want to be heard. I drank bad coffee and watched other people's shoulders get heavier. I went home and wrote reports. I learned to put soft words on hard things so someone would sign. I thought that way I could make the rough edges not cut. It was a lie. She looked at me then and didn't look away. He was kind to me when he didn't have to be. He wrote to my mother when I went home too soon. He told her I was brave in a job where nobody thought the person at the desk counted. When you said your father's job out loud, it cracked a shell I kept around me in this building. I laughed because panic does that to your mouth. Can you call him? I asked. The question came out before I could think if it was fair. Mark took a breath and let it out through his nose. He looked at the principal. She looked back like a person standing on ice, measuring the sound of the cracks. He said, I can try. I can't promise. If we get him, it'll be short. He took out his phone. No case. A crack on the corner. It looked like something you use, not something you own. He scrolled and pressed and put it to his ear. He turned to the window. The rain ran in sheets down the glass. He said a name that didn't mean anything to me. He listened. Then his mouth did that almost smile again. Brother, he said, I need 30 seconds for a kid. No names. He looked at me and hit speaker. Hey kid, a voice said. Not a movie voice. A voice with gravel and a long road in it. I'm okay. I love you. Don't pick fights you don't need. Take care of your mother. I'll see you when I see you. I made a sound that wasn't a word. My throat didn't know the shape. I felt my face go wet. The room held me like a hand under a glass. He's got to go, Mark said softly. He clicked it off, said a few more words low that weren't for us, then put the phone away and pressed his palm there a second, like you do when you feel heat through a shirt. He took a small notebook out of his jacket. Brown cover, duct tape on the spine. Worn soft, edges rounded. He held it with both hands. Your father started this for you, he said. He told me if he couldn't carry it to you himself, I should do it when it was right. I thought maybe there's no right time. Maybe you make one. He passed it to me. It was heavier than it looked, like paper soaks up more than ink. On the first page, he had drawn my name the way he does on notes for my mother. The M, a little big, the A small and steady. Under that, he had written things like this is how you get a car to move when it doesn't want to. And this is how you keep a scared person from feeling alone. And this is how to be sorry, right? There were little drawings of knots. A clock taken apart. A shelter made with a coat and a line. I pressed my hand on the page and felt the grooves his pen made. It was like touching the ghost of a wheel that still spins. The principal wiped her glasses with the bottom of her shirt and put them back on. She looked at our teacher like you look at someone who has stood too long holding something heavy and you only now noticed. The teacher was pale. Her face had lost that thin hard line it wore between the mouth and the chin. She wasn't doing the face anymore. It was just her. I'm sorry, she said. The words were quiet and low and without decoration. I knew the weight of that room once. I pretended I didn't. I laughed when I should have listened. I hurt you. I won't dress the wound with reasons. I nodded. I couldn't speak because if I started, I might not stop. The notebook was warm in my hands. Mark watched me like he was ready to step in front of something if it fell off a shelf. He flipped the coin in his hand, just a small movement. It flashed and was gone. It's not a trophy, he said. It's a promise. It says you saw the hard thing and you didn't look away. He glanced at our teacher. You did see. You didn't look away then. Do that again now. He left first. He told the principal, I'll send you a number to call if noise comes. He looked at me and said if you need someone to show up, I can do that. He looked at the teacher and said her first name again. It didn't sound like a threat. It sounded like a door held open. The day carried on because buildings don't stop for people. Beds hung. Kids ran. People chewed gum and talked too loud in the stairwell because it made them feel normal. I held the notebook under my coat until the final bell. At home, my mother's note was on the counter in her quick, straight handwriting. Soup in the fridge. Proud of you. Back by 9. I texted her a picture of the notebook and a heart, and then I sat on the floor with my back to the couch and I read. I read about how to keep a promise simple. I read about how to pack a bag you can carry all day. I read about the first time he had to sit in a blind for 12 hours without moving and how he made friends with the ants. I read about listening for the quiet under the loud, because that's the one that matters. He had drawn a little ladder on a page and written make it for others. When she came home, she took off her shoes and sat down without her jacket and looked at the notebook like it might fall apart if she touched it. She put her fingers on it anyway, Light. He asked him to bring it, she said. She smiled, tired and soft around the eyes. He told me if a man named Mark showed up with a certain kind of coin and a coat that had been mended twice, I should listen. I said at the time that I always listen. She laughed once, tired. You came home with a look today. I thought something had broken. It didn't. It tilted. I think it just tilted back. The next morning, I woke up to a text from a number I didn't know. It said, "I'm sorry." No name. Then a second one. "I will fix what I can." Then a third. "Thank him for me when you can." I knew who it was. For a second, I got angry all over again. Then went quiet inside. Some apologies close things. Some open a new door you have to decide about. I left the phone on the bed and got dressed. At school, people were doing their thing. A boy in a hoodie told me his uncle knew a guy with a coin like that, and did I know what it meant? I shook my head. Lena tucked her hair into her scarf and said, "You don't owe anyone anything." A girl in math class said, "Is it true?" I said, "I don't talk about it." Her mouth went tight, and she shrugged, like I had been rude not to give her a story. Rumors were out their legs and slow by lunch. Before last period, the principal came on the speaker and said the English teacher would be out for a few days and we would be kind to the sub. No one made a noise then. If I had closed my eyes, I would have known the room by sound only. That was when I found the coin. It was in the front pocket of my backpack, in a small space where I keep a lip balm and a bus card and a pencil that never works. I knew I hadn't put it there. A cold went through me, then a flare of warm. I took it out. It was smooth from fingers. A crest in the middle. Letters worn low. I rolled it over. It had the slight curve of something that had lived in a pocket for years. I showed my mother that night. She turned it with the pad of her thumb. She smiled in a way that made her eyes shine. "He had one like it," she said. "He gave his away once when it mattered. Maybe it found its way back to the house." I texted Mark and asked if he had lost something. He said no. He said it was mine now. He said that wasn't how those things usually go, but sometimes a thing goes where it should. The next week, Ms. Harrow stood in front of us again. The room got the kind of quiet that makes you want to cough just to break it. She didn't do her face. She didn't make a speech. She said, "I did not listen to a student's truth. I am sorry. I will not do that again." Then she wrote the prompt on the board without looking back. Write about the ground and what keeps you from falling through it. It sounded like a strange prompt until I started to write and my hand didn't stop. I wrote about a voice through a phone and a coin and a page that had my name on it in a hand I knew better than my own. I didn't hand that in. I kept it. There were small ripples. A boy in gym asked me if my dad killed people. I looked at him and said, "You don't get to ask that." He flushed and looked at his shoes. A woman from the office asked me to step in and sign something for an attendance thing, and then asked in a careful voice if I was safe at home, and I said yes, because I was. Jonah told me at lunch that his dad had made him watch a video about ratchet straps and then wouldn't stop talking about balance points. He said it was actually cool. He said also, "I think my dad is different now. Like lighter. Like he dropped a bag." A few days later, when I left school, Mark was parked by the curb. He leaned against the side of his truck with his hands in his pockets like he had time. He doesn't text like a teenager. He had asked me the day before if I had a minute after class, and I had typed yes and a thumbs up and then laughed at myself for the thumbs up. He smiled when he saw me, small and real. "Got a second?" He said. "I want to show you something." He opened the back and let me see the inside of the truck. It wasn't big, but it was clean. Straps hung on hooks. A pair of gloves lay on a shelf. A dent on the wall had a piece of tape over it where the paint had peeled. He picked up a strap and showed me how to thread it and pull so it stayed tight without cutting into what you were holding. He had me do it. My fingers slipped and then found it. He nodded like I'd done a job you could pay a person for. "That coin," he said, waving a hand toward my bag where he knew it was, "is a promise. It got handed to me when I did something right. I gave it away when someone needed to know I had been there. Your father told me to give you something to hold." He meant the notebook. I added the coin. He won't mind. He might try to pretend to mind. He won't. I don't know what to say, I told him. He shrugged. "You don't have to say anything," he said. "Just use it when the ground moves. You can put it in a pocket and know it's there. That's all it does." He looked down the street and then back at me. "One more thing. People are going to try to make your father into a story because it makes them feel something. You don't owe anyone the parts you don't want to give." At night after that, I started reading a page from the notebook before bed. I would find a line and sit with it. Some nights, it was something simple, like how to keep a match dry. Some nights, it was how to forgive someone who isn't sorry. There was a page where he had written, "Sometimes you don't correct the person who is wrong about you. You let them be wrong and you go on." There was a page where he had sketched a hallway and marked where to stand so you can see both exits. He had written, "Always know the doors, even in places you think are safe." One afternoon, Lena and I walked to the river after school. We leaned on the rail and watched the water carry logs and bottles and white foam in long lines. She told me about her brother leaving for a job across the state and how she missed him the most in the kitchen because of the way he left cabinet doors open. No one had laughed at me in days, but people watched me for a while like something might happen. It didn't. We bought cheap tea from the little window on the corner and blew on it. We talked about nothing. It felt like the right kind of normal. When I got home, there was an envelope on the doormat with my name on it. No return address. Inside was a photo. For people under a shade, made by a sheet hung between poles. A heat-washed world around them. 3 men and a young woman with her hair back and a tired face. One of the men had his hand on a radio clipped to a vest. His mouth was set in the way that always made my mother stand up straighter when he walked into a room. On the back of the photo, in careful block letters, the kind you use when you have to fill out a form, someone had written, "He brought the room back when it left." Thank him for that. The signature was a first name I'll keep. I stuck the picture in the back of the notebook. I told my mother, and she looked at it for a long time and placed her thumb on the woman's face and said, "I remember that girl." She wrote to me once about the light through the slats of a vent and how it looked like a ladder. When parent-teacher night came around the next month, the halls were warm and full of voices. The walls were lined with art made with paint that smelled like sugar. My mother couldn't come because of a double shift. I walked the hallway anyway just to see it. Ms. Harrow stood in her doorway in a plain sweater with her hands folded. When she saw me, she held her breath a second. "Hello," she said. "Hi," I said. "How is the notebook?" She asked, and her voice caught on the word like it had a burr. "It's good," I said. "It helps." She nodded. Her eyes went wet, and she let them. She didn't make them stop. "I wrote an apology to your mother," she said. "Not to tell her a story. To tell her that I did a bad thing to you, and that I will do better, or I will go. I don't know if that's the right thing. It is the thing I have." "Thank you," I said. I meant it. There were other small changes. The principal put up a sign in the teacher's lounge that said, "We believe students who share their lives." It was hand-lettered, not printed, and you could tell she had made it herself after everyone had gone home. In class, when people wrote about hard things, the room got better at holding them. The boy who had asked me the dumb question in gym asked in class if he could write about his dad in jail and not get in trouble. She said yes. He wrote. He cried a little and didn't hide it. She passed him a tissue and didn't make a big deal of it. The air cleared. On the day the weather turned and the trees looked like they were thinking about spring, a man stopped me outside the store with the red door and the gum under the bench. He had a cap pulled low and a coat that had seen rain. He said my name. I stepped back a little, because that's what you do when a stranger says your name. He lifted his hands, empty. "I know your father," he said. "Before you ask, I'm not a friend. I'm a person who owes. He told me to tell you that the thing about the ladder he drew is true. You make it for others." Then he crossed the street and was gone into the kind of day that swallows people easy. I stood there a long time looking at the empty space where he had been. The story did not turn into a movie. No one put music under it. My father didn't walk into the gym on a bright day and lift me off the floor with a shout. Some nights he calls. Some nights he doesn't. Sometimes the calls are a line cut by wind, and we get forwards. Sometimes I just hold the coin in my fist until the metal warms. In class, sometimes I watch the way the light moves across the wall, and I think of that room with no windows and a girl who drank coffee that tasted like old dirt and learned how certain words can help or harm. When I see her now, her hair is a little softer. She leaves the top button of her blouse undone. She says, "Tell me more," and means it. On the last page of the notebook, under the tape, is a small line I didn't see at first because the corner had curled. It says, "Truth is a quiet tool. It's not a weapon unless you make it into one. Use it to fix things." A week after I read that, I saw a mess. Harrow on the sidewalk outside school with a tote bag full of books. A guy walked by and picked up a kid's backpack and dropped it in the street for a laugh. The kid froze. She stepped out into the lane without thinking and grabbed it, and the guy said a word you can't say at school, and she told him, simple and even no. He looked at her for a second and then he went because some people don't want to deal with a person who has decided. She brought the bag back to the boy and touched his shoulder and told him to breathe into his hands. The ground under my feet feels less like it wants to throw me and more like it wants to hold me up. When I sit at the window in English, I see the gray day and the way the trees take their time and the pattern the rain makes on the glass, and I am not waiting for a door in my chest to open and let cold in. I still miss my father so much it aches behind my ribs. But the ache is not empty. It has shape. It has the sound of a voice that says I'm okay. It has pages that smell like paper and ink and the oil from his hands. It has a coin that warms in my palm and results in nothing except the knowledge of its weight. Every once in a while, someone new will ask me a question I don't owe them. They will try to make me choose between telling a story they can use and being rude. I have learned to say no gently. I have learned to let other people's feelings about my life belong to them. I have learned to sit with the rain and feel it without naming the cloud. If I ever have to stand up in a room and say a thing that shakes someone else, I will remember the look on a woman's face when she heard a name from a past she tried to lock away, and I will choose my words like tools, not knives. On my dresser, next to a picture of my mother holding a paper plate with a cake that slid to one side because the car turned too fast on the way home, the coin sits in a small dish with a few other small things that hold me to who I am. A friend's bracelet. A button from my father's old shirt that came off in the wash and that my mother could never match back. A dry leaf with a perfect vein pattern. I pick them up some nights and weigh them. I listen for the quiet under the loud, and I find it. It is thin and stubborn, and always there if you bend your head the right way. What happened was simple. A teacher laughed when she should have listened. A man walked into a room and put down a coin. A phone call crossed a distance you could not measure with miles. A notebook made of paper held more than words, and a girl learned that truth does not need to be loud to be real. I think of that often when the day tries to shove me. I think of it in line at the store, in the hum of the bus, in the hall, when someone drops a pencil and it rolls until it hits the wall. I think of it when I hear a door somewhere far down the corridor open and close, and the building takes a breath and lets it out. I stand a little straighter. I count the steps to the exits. I do not borrow a voice. I use mine. It is enough.